Hi guys, I'm Kyle and I'm here with
William.
And we're here to talk about management versus eradication. And this is going to cover a bunch of topics ranging from fish disease to coral pests. Where do you want to get started?
Definitely the one I'm most comfortable with, coral pests. I think I've got it pretty down, but my tactic is definitely management. But really, what's the difference between management and eradication, right? So management is if you have it in your tank or you're not necessarily trying to avoid adding it to your tank, just kind of prevent. Whereas eradication is complete prevention, complete removal of these pests, never allowing them in your tank. And in my opinion, very hard to do, right? So for me, all the tanks I take care of here, I manage the pests in them, and they're pretty successful.
I'd say that looks beautiful. I think
Thank
you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a bunch of different approaches. People have different philosophies when it comes to keeping the reef tank. Management is definitely going to be the easiest route to go, in my opinion, just because complete eradication or complete prevention is going to drive you crazy.
Right.
Because we're talking, you're quarantining your fish, you're quarantining all of your inverts before you add them to your tank, you're quarantining all your corals before you add them to your tank, and most people don't have the space, time, or energy to manage all of that logistical nightmare to go into just a reef tank, especially if you only have like a 15-gallon tank. Is it right the effort? I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but there are ways to do it. It is entirely possible, for sure. The way I would do it is long-term quarantine processes, very, very specific. They need to be away from your tank. They can't be anywhere near your tank. There's a lot of specific things you would need to do to completely prevent a pest from coming into your tank. One of the best ways I find is starting with a good source. So if you know your source is pest-free and then it goes through a quarantine, that basically means there's no way it's ever going to have a pest on it.
Yeah. Quality sources are going to be the key here for fish or corals or inverts, just to prevent pests or diseases from getting in the tank. So
yeah,
healthy fish, healthy corals, healthy inverts is going to be the way to have the best success with either approach that you're going for.
Definitely.
So if you're going to set up something like a quarantine tank for your corals or inverts, what would that look like for you?
Like I said, far away from my display tank. These pests can become airborne. If you got damp hands, they can transfer. It's very, very easy for these pests to transfer. You can't see them, so you can't tell when you're doing it. Another thing that I'm going to do is plenty of hiding spots for the fish. I think a lot of people kind of avoid that or don't really pay attention to that. You need a lot of hiding spots because they've just gone through something very stressful, and most fish's like key preventative measure to surviving and feeling comfortable is hiding spots.
Yeah.
So they need hiding spots. You definitely want to set it up, and you need to decide whether you're observing or treating. And that's another big key.
Yeah.
So if you're going to observe, you want to set up hiding spots, probably no sand, probably no rock, and just go and observe the fish for, I'd say probably about 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
If you're going to entirely try to avoid these things, 2 to 3 months is probably a good amount of time. But an easier way is probably something like chloroquine phosphate or some other liquid additive that you can add to the water that's a treatment to actually kill these pests.
Yeah, we've gone over a couple of approaches on previous videos with Elliot. He has a really good pad down process for all of the fish that he manages over at Marine Collectors, and TSM Aquatics and other places like that quarantine have their own approaches to it.
Right.
But the shorter route to it, if you're going to quarantine to prevent diseases from ever entering your tank, and definitely be prophylactically treating your fish with a medication. Still a debate on whether that's actually good for the fish or if you should be doing that in the first place, but that's going to guarantee that you don't actually introduce those pests into the tank because you're going to be treating whether the fish has symptoms or not. So if it has it and it's not showing any signs, you're going to be treating for it anyway. So should theoretically then not enter your tank once it's in the display tank.
Yep.
But can be a little tricky, especially if you're newer to the hobby, and medications can make acclimation to captivity a lot harder for those wild caught fish, especially those finicky ones like your regal angels, copperhead butterflies. If you're doing copper and stuff like that, that suppresses appetite, and those fish need to eat when they get into captivity. So
absolutely. So I mean, one of the easiest ways, good source of a fish, captive bred is one of the easiest ways to have a good source of fish. Make sure they're eating, and if you want to prophylactically treat it, go for it. But probably getting a good source fish is the key.
Yeah. And then if you're doing corals, it's going to be a little bit different. You don't have to do full medication treatments.
Right.
We're looking at things like coral dip and then followed by observation and probably doing a couple series of dips, right?
Yeah, so I'm more into the coral side. Fish are a little bit intimidating for me, but I definitely love all the fish in our office here. But the coral is where I feel most comfortable, and so I've started dipping with potassium permanganate. It's a salt-based dip, and it's very, very aggressive. It's a very strong dip. It is, in my opinion, an alternative to like a bay or like a pesticide dip, which is kind of an older, outdated way, in my opinion, to do it. This is a little bit less harsh. It is marketed for reefing, so you're comfortable, using a reefing product. And you just follow the instructions. It's a very normal dip, but I'll dip, keep it in a quarantine, dip again, keep it in a quarantine, and I'll dip every few days if the coral's looking good. If the coral is not looking good though, you definitely want to dip at the beginning and then leave it to sit, and hopefully it'll recover.
Okay. So key is to make sure it's recovered before you do the next dip.
Yes. Right? Yeah. You can, if it's not recovering, there are like less harsh dips, an iodine dip for some kinds of corals, or some other less harsh dips. The essential oil based dips are good options for something that's still in recovery. But if you're really trying to entirely prevent pests, a salt-based dip is the strongest way to go for sure.
It's good to know. I haven't done that route yet. I've usually just done the coral dip from Tropic Marin. It's usually the one I go for.
Okay.
But might need to change it up a little bit.
Yeah, I've been using the Polyp Lab, or the Polyp Lab one. And it's the potassium permanganate based dip. It's really quite strong. I dip all of these acros each time I frag them back here. And they do great. They bounce back basically instantly with it. And they're ready to start encrusting right away. So that is the way I avoid pests to begin with. But you're probably going to get them in your tank at some point. They can come in on a drop of water. So what do you do when you have them?
Yeah. So once you have them, it's a game of management, unless you're going to take the whole tank apart and start from scratch, which I don't think most people want to do, especially if you have a 150-gallon tank. That's a project.
Yeah, a little bit too much work.
Yeah. So if you already have a pest, the approach to that specific pest is going to be kind of different for each pest. Good thing is that Thomas has a whole series on how I wreck my tank. So if you have any of those pests that he's already covered, good opportunity to check those out.
It's a pretty crazy series. I watch it. And I learn something new about every pest. So definitely check it out. If you have a specific pest in mind, something like Aperture or like green hair algae, these kind of things you need very specific approaches for each one. But how about some of the more common ones? What do we do?
So I'm going to say for more of the common ones, especially if we're talking like coral pests specifically, your hands and yourself are going to be one of the best tools of the job. So whether that's Aperture, Bryopsis, cyano, hair algae, manually removing or manually addressing those things is going to be the best approach. So manually removing the hair algae when you see tufts of algae on the rocks, manually siphoning out that cyanobacteria at the sand bed when you do a water change. If you have Aperture, getting that Frank-Steph Aperture or Aperture X or your favorite Aperture eliminating product, actually injecting them to kill them, is going to be giving you a leaps and bounds head start at addressing the issue if it's a full-on breakout and it's ruining your tank.
Absolutely. I think that even goes farther than that. If you're talking about even like acro-eating flatworms or other types of flatworms, different nudibranchs that may be pests, removing them yourself is actually really, really effective. I go in here, I turkey base the rocks. Every once in a while you see a flatworm fly off. But before I was turkey basting these corals in the rocks, they're everywhere. So you definitely have a massive role to play in your tank's health. Yeah. And I think you should definitely get in there and get rid of some of these pests. Now, some of them can get a little out of control. Something like green hair algae or Bryopsis. If it gets really intense, it can get really out of control and you definitely can't manage it yourself. What do you do in a situation like that?
So depending on the situation that's at hand, I might go for something like a utilitarian fish or invert that can help address the problem, especially if I'm dealing with like Aperture, hair algae. I might get like an Aperture eating filefish that I can get in the rockwork where I can't physically reach or get them, or like something like a Bergia nudibranch that can get even where the filefish can't get.
Right.
So things like that, adding some extra tangs, beefing up my cleanup crew for any of those algae outbreaks. And in cases where it's like really extreme and I don't have a tank that's suitable for any of those utilitarian inverts or fish, I might go the route of medication, but that's usually my last preferred approach because the medications are going to have impacts. They cause harm to a specific organism and it's bound to stress out other organisms that are similar or related.
Right.
So if you're doing like algae outbreaks, you're adding like an algicide, you're probably going to harm your corals that have a form of algae in their tissue. It's going to stress them out a little bit. So
yeah, even more to that, an algicide or something that's going to kill all of the pests at once is going to release whatever's in the pests back into your tank. And so pests use nutrients to grow.
Yep.
And so they're going to release nutrients back into your tank. Things like some flatworms are going to have literally like poison in them. They're going to be very deadly to release into your tank all at once. So manual removal and then preventative fish inverts is definitely the way to go first for the coral problems. But what about fish problems? I've had fish problems. I've sometimes struggled with them. Sometimes you read that you got to catch the fish and like take them out and treat them or something like that. Sometimes there's other things, but what do you like to do?
So assuming we're going the route of management versus eradication, eradication is going to be a whole process of taking the tank apart, getting all the fish out. Whereas it's adding more stress to the fish, which in my opinion is the last thing you want to do to a fish that is sick. Personally, when I'm sick, I don't like being stressed out.
No, I don't want to be moved.
If I don't go to work or I don't go to school, I stay in bed rest. So I want to give my fish the opportunity to just do what they need to do to relax and stay calm. So when it comes to fish illnesses, the best approach is going to usually be things with equipment and things with nutrition and things that just overall lower the stress for the fish. So we're looking at things, parasites like velvet, like ick. A lot of equipment is going to be really good at helping manage that. A couple of the things that really come to mind early are going to be UV sterilizers. That's going to help reduce how fast any of those parasites can reproduce in your aquarium. So anything that's free floating in the aquarium at a specific stage in those parasites' life cycle will get zapped with UV that or can't reproduce.
I'm totally sold on UVs, honestly. I put them on every single tank I set up now. They've gotten a lot more budget friendly too, and they're pretty easy to put on. It's pretty easy.
And they're also not only for fish. If you have bacterial blooms or green water from a phytoplankton bloom in your tank, they also double down as that. So you just have to adjust the flow rate to suit whatever you're trying to address.
Definitely.
The other piece of equipment that I think is a little underrated when it comes to parasite management is adding a sediment filter to your reef tank. So a lot of those parasites are pretty small, but if you're using a 1 micron sediment filter, that is going to catch a fair amount of them because they are bigger than 1 micron, generally speaking.
Right, especially in their waterborne phase.
Yes,
absolutely.
So if you have a sediment filter running on your tank, similar to a UV sterilizer, I wouldn't recommend running it off your drain line, especially in a larger tank because it's going to clog up.
It'll clog in. It's pretty much instantly. Yep.
But just hook up a pump, use something like the BRS, like carbon and GFO reactor, put it in one of those RO 7 filters.
Right.
And it's going to help polish the water even more. So you get water clarity out of the deal, but your fish also have less parasites to worry about and fight off.
That's a great little trick. Yeah. If you're running into some issues, you have a UV going on, maybe you got a ton of tangs and they're showing a little ick, add that onto your tank and it could definitely pick up some parasites. Yeah, great little tip there. And so what else? There's equipment, right?
Yep.
We talked about. And the next thing for me, logically, is food.
Yeah.
Absolutely, there's ways to get your fish healthier through food. So for me, one of the big ways, actually it's kind of an old school way, I used to buy some of the foods that had medication in them.
Okay.
But I found that if your corals eat them, that becomes a problem.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So I try to avoid the foods with medications in them. And instead I try and just bulk the fish up and really overfeed them to an extent to make sure that they can fight it off themselves, right?
Make them fat and happy. That usually helps.
Yep.
Boost their immune system. So just like with yourself, when you're sick, nutrition is a very key important in fighting off any infection. If you're not eating a healthy diet, you have poor nutrient deficits, like no vitamin C in your diet,
right?
Probably not going to fight off an infection very well. But if you get good nutrients, good variety of food, you're better off. Same with your fish. So when it comes to fish, I like feeding a varied diet. So I like feeding like a mixed food like rods. Or if I only have single pack frozen foods like brine shrimp, mesa shrimp, bloodworms and stuff like that.
Right.
I'll mix them together just so that the fish can get a variety. So it's not eating the same thing every single day for every single meal.
Right.
And then pellets, if your fish eat them, super nutrient dense. Flakes, also super nutrient dense. Good way to help vary the nutrition as well. But then there's some additives that you can add to your foods that help with the nutrition profile. Are there any that you like to use?
Yeah, definitely. I think garlic is definitely my number one. There's a kind of a misconception around garlic though. A lot of people think that garlic itself helps, fight off infections or fight off diseases. It's not necessarily the garlic. I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to say the garlic does something or doesn't, but what it definitely does is encourages the fish to eat. you can tell. If you add it to fish, like these Anthias up here are a little bit of picky eaters. I finally gotten them eating pellets, but before then they wouldn't really eat the pellets. I had to add the garlic into the food. Then they would eat. Doesn't matter what kind of food it was at that point. You throw the garlic in, they'll eat it. So it definitely encourages feeding. It's a good feeding response to get picky fish to eat. And then another additive that I really like is Selcon. It's a vitamin and fatty acid. It's what we need too. So it's really important for the fish. A lot of the processed foods maybe don't have as much, or the frozen foods, maybe that some of the vitamins or the proteins got a little damaged in the freezing process. So you can add it back with a liquid additive like Selcon. And it maybe encourages the fish to eat, but when they eat it, it definitely helps them.
Yeah. And we could also go down the route of coral foods to help your corals fight off any.
Absolutely.
Well, thinking of that, I'm thinking like things like coral aminos. If you have LPS corals, LPS pellets, if they're getting food and nutrients aside from just light and just whatever's growing them, you're going to boost their health. I mean, we've already shown that with coral aminos, where we've given ill-looking corals coral aminos and they turn around in a few weeks looking really good. So it's hard to refute that.
Often overlooked. You think like feed your fish so they get bulked up, so they get all healthy, but you can feed your corals too. They can get bulked up, they can get healthier too. Definitely an important thing to keep in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And then with management, we also just have stress-free environment, or lowering the stress.
Right.
So there's a couple different things that come to mind with me on that topic. So managing your temperature. So making sure that your temperature range isn't swinging super wildly.
Yep.
Making sure for your corals that your alkalinity, calcium, magnesium isn't up and down, wild swings.
Yep.
I think there's some natural variation within any parameter. So you don't want like a stable straight line on your graph if you chart it, but you don't want a super wild up and down, having them guess what's next.
Yeah.
Type situation.
Yeah. Ultimately, if you look at the ocean, it's pretty stable.
Yeah.
Nothing changes very quickly in the ocean ever. So you can have changes in your tank, just not quickly.
Yeah.
The slower the changes happen, the more stable the tank's going to be, the healthier and more comfortable the fish and coral are going to be in the tank. And same thing with fish, the environment matters a lot. So if you have a big open tank, you're going to need fish that want to swim in the big open. If you have a bunch of fish that love caves and hiding, and you have a big NSA, negative space aquascape, it maybe not going to be the best for them. Something like this tank has a lot of hiding spaces, even though it looks really open. So it does cater to a lot of the hiding fish, but ultimately it's really open. And so you want a lot of fish that swim in the open.
Yeah. I don't know if I have anything else on the topic. Do you have anything else to add on management or eradication?
I think we nailed it.
I think we got it covered. See you in the next one.